Let's see. Banjo, Kazooie, we're home.
I saw the jigsaw piece! It's Banjo! It's Banjo! It happened! Let's go! What? No way! No way!
Is this Banjo?
Banjo! Banjo! It's Banjo!
Banjo!
Banjo! That was a puzzle piece!
Oh, the puzzle piece!
Oh shoot! Oh! Oh no! Oh no! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Yeah! Fuck yes!
Isn't it funny? There he is! There he is!
No way! I can't believe it's actually happening! I missed this high! Finally! There you go!
Oh my god!
It's Banjo!
Dude, where in the goal?
Yes! Woo! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
What can I say? People love Banjo. In the 90s, Nintendo was on top of their game. The Super Nintendo was released almost a year after the turn of the decade in Japan, late into August of '91 in North America, and 1992 in European regions. They helped create some of the greatest icons with their Nintendo Entertainment System, and everyone wanted to be on their good side, because if you were buddy-buddy with Nintendo, you already had a huge potential install base by default. Now, Sega was starting to hit it big, being one of the only other 16-bit competitors that was affordable and widely known. Of course, that's not to say there aren't other consoles that were on the market, but the Genesis and Super Nintendo are the main competitors of the 4th generation of consoles. Nintendo would continue into the late 90s, jumping onto the 64-bit bandwagon with the creation of their Nintendo 64. The N64 had some of the greatest games of the generation despite the hardware limitations in comparison to the competition's PlayStation.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived. Pack up your stuff!
And the Atari Jaguar. That thing never stood a chance. There were a whole lot of mainstays on the console. Mario made his debut into a 3D space and revolutionized the 3D platformer. The Legend of Zelda got not one, but 2 games on the system that are known worldwide for their innovation on the series by perfectly translating what was exclusively a top-down formula into a 3D one. Castlevania was there.
What is a man?
But among these old and loved franchises, there were plenty of newer intellectual properties being introduced too. Rareware had made plenty of iconic games for Nintendo systems before, like Battletoads on the NES, a crossover with Double Dragon on plenty of other systems. They made movie-licensed games like A Nightmare on Elm Street and Beetlejuice, both on the NES. The Donkey Kong Country games for the Super Nintendo are commonly attributed to DK's modern design that's still used today, as well as the creation of Diddy and Dixie Kong. But for the N64, they made the GoldenEye and Perfect Dark games, and our star of the show today, Banjo Kazooie. All of the Banjo Kazooie games are beloved by everyone. Most of the Banjo Kazooie games are beloved by everyone. Banjo Kazooie was one of those games and characters everyone associated with Nintendo, even if they weren't technically Nintendo. Think of Simon Belmont or Mega Man or the previously mentioned Battletoads. They're in the same name as those characters, and it's no wonder that they finally made it into Smash along with Simon Belmont and Mega Man. Everyone knows them, everyone loves them. They were heavily requested Smash Bros. Characters for a long time. And I mean heavily requested. If there's a franchise as synonymous with the N64 as any of Nintendo's actual properties, it would probably be Banjo and Kazooie. The game practically birthed the collectathon genre of games that has all but died out recently. It spawned a spiritual successor in the form of Yooka-Laylee made by former Rare employees, and the formula of doing many different objectives in a world without having to back out to the menu is something that not even Super Mario himself would do until 2017's Mario Odyssey. This is the quintessential N64 introduction game I would recommend to anyone, even over Mario 64 in fact. If you want to learn how to properly wield this behemoth, Banjo Kazooie would be an amazing first choice. The arsenal of moves that you have at your disposal makes navigating the game and learning how to move in a 3D space so satisfying. I can ram, run, fly, fart, swim, shield, shoot. I can do just about anything I could think of. This game defined the 3D platformer, and it's what comes to mind when I think of the term. I know Mario revolutionized it, but Banjo took the revolution by the balls and perfected it. He has tons more maneuverability than Mario ever did, and I like Mario 64, don't take that the wrong way. I should probably make clear that I am playing on an emulator for this video, Project 64 with the Glide N64 plugin, for that matter. I have an actual copy of Banjo Kazooie and N64 in here somewhere, but I wasn't able to find it, and I don't know where it went. There are Xbox 360 remasters, but I don't have an Xbox 360, nor do I have an Xbox One to play them on the Game Pass, so an emulator will have to do. Besides, it'll give me the best visual quality anyway. My capture card is a piece of crap. With his recent reveal for Smash Ultimate, take that Master Steve, I decided to revisit this game that, yes, I have an incredible bias and nostalgia for, and I gotta say, Banjo just doesn't age badly. It can't age badly. It's one of those games that utilized the controller it had and the system it was on in such a way that it feels as natural as it always was meant to be. Of course, it released 2 years into the N64's life, so they had the advantage of knowing how to make the software work well with the hardware that they had. Especially since it wasn't made out of an attempt to define the genre of a 3D platformer, it just happens to do it out of a coincidence. The point of the game is to collect stuff. Only 2 of those many things you can collect are required to forward the game though, jiggies and notes. You need to put together pictures to unlock areas of the world, and the notes to unlock the doorway to those areas. It sounds more confusing than it is, I promise. The worlds are what I would describe as a very primitive open world. You really can just roam and do whatever you want in mostly any order. A lot of the time that you spend is spent figuring out what to do. Some things are easy to find, others are harder to find, and sometimes you can't even do everything in the world on the first visit. But when just figuring out how to accomplish the goal is just as rewarding as doing the actual accomplishment, I'd say that's a fairly good sign. Sometimes you even need to turn into different forms to get some of the jiggies with the help of Mumbo, a talking skeleton shaman who just wants some rest. All of this is to rescue Banjo's sister Tootie, who's been kidnapped by Gruntilda the Witch and her goons to suck out her pretty essence, so that she can be the prettiest in all the land. The rest of the game after that point is you pretty much just questing and collecting to reach Gruntilda before that can happen. Banjo's not a very story-driven game. You never really check in on Grunty or Tootie while playing unless you save and quit, which for some reason always ends with Gruntilda winning. There are a few set types of collectibles in each of the worlds. There are 10 jigsaw pieces, 100 notes, 5 Jinjos, a plethora of Mumbo tokens, eggs, feathers, and a variation in the golden feathers. Each of these are needed to make some kind of progress. Jigsaws are used to fill in pictures to unlock worlds, notes are used to open the paths to the world that you opened, collecting all of the Jinjos will give you a single jigsaw for the world, and the Mumbo tokens are used to complete objectives for jigsaws. While each can have their fair share of difficulties with them, and some are certainly harder than others, there's not too many of them, so you won't be running around like a bird with its bear cut off for too long, hopefully. The worlds each have their own theme, with no two themes reoccurring. You have Mumbles Mountain, which is a good starting off generic green valley that's small in size and is easily completable. Treasure Trove Cove is a beach area filled with pirates and sentient chests where you'll search the seas for golden treasures. It's fairly easy and straightforward. Clankers Cavern is where you'll help Clanker, a giant metal shark-shaped trash grinder, and search the dirty waters for notes and jiggies. A bit of a pain to navigate with the water, but it's doable. Bubble Gloop Swamp is a swamp filled with creatures of the marsh kind that need your help with various tasks. You learn to sing, eat things, and wear boots. Freeze Easy Peak is where you'll experience a true hell. I have seriously never felt this angry in a place this chilled out. Gobi's Valley is an Egyptian desert filled with sphinxes, sand, mummies, sand, pyramids, and sand. Navigating this place can be a chore with many falls and hurtful sand. Mad Monster Mansion is an eerie haunted mansion crawling with creepy crawlies and ghosts waiting for you to dare to take them on. Rusty Bucket Bay is a shipyard with a titular ship in the middle of it all where you'll have to navigate oily waters and fend off the shipmates. And finally you have Click Clock Wood, a world comprised of 4 areas, each differing by its season. This is by far my favorite world of the game, and although it's one of the more frustrating worlds of the game, with many puzzles being high up and little margin for error. This game truly has memorable sights, songs, and jokes. Nothing feels boring, and it's a game I feel compelled to complete fully even though you never really have to. And that's a good thing, because you do need to collect a good chunk of the stuff in the game to actually fully beat it. You need at least 94 jiggies to even access the final fight out of a total 100. Of course, that's not the end, because ideally you'll need 882 notes out of 900 at minimum to open the last note door, just so you can use an extra 4 jiggies, making the total 98, to fill in the final and only optional picture behind it before the final fight, so that you can get double health. It's probably the only game I've ever played that you might as well 100%, because by the end you'll be so close anyway. It's a very unique game in that aspect, you know, besides the odd shovelware game here and there. Second disclaimer, I lost the footage for the Gruntilda fight. So the footage you'll be seeing is from YouTuber PackAttack04082. It's the Xbox 360 remaster, so I hope you don't mind the inconsistency in visual quality. The final fight is a rather unique one. Nearly every attack that you've learned throughout the game is tested here in the 3 or 4 different phases throughout the fight. Explaining every phase would be a bit too much of a chore, so I won't bother, but I do want to make note of the motherfucking Ginjonator! Hell yeah, this thing is a gigantic blue Jinjo that beats the shit out of Gruntilda and kills her and puts her in the fucking ground. It's a fairly simple game, so a fairly short description it gets. I really couldn't possibly add more to the conversation on the topic of Banjo that hasn't already been said, and I never truly beat the game when I was a kid. The farthest I remember ever getting was maybe the beach, and this closure helps me rest easy finally having seen the end. I can close this chapter on my life after finally having gotten enough pieces to finish the picture.